Good evening. My name is Joshua Free. I'm the director of the modern Mardukite movement and developer of Necronomicon, the Anunnaki Bible. This is episode 7 of our Mardukite TV 10th anniversary reboot on YouTube, where we've been focusing on primarily reintroducing our groundbreaking foundation work to a new generation of truth seekers and others who've just now been discovering our next-gen style of esoteric and mystical, spiritual, and archaeological research and revival. So tonight we'll continue discussing our original source book anthology of Mesopotamian Mysteries called Necronomicon, the Anunnaki Bible, and it's now available worldwide for the first time in this deluxe cloth-bound collector's edition hardcover, just in time for the 10th anniversary of it. And so one thing I wanted to bring up in this video is that people should beware the imitators on this. The modern Mardukite movement has spent the last decade publicly developing these archives, these and many other books, in a way that the world has never really seen before, or at least not for thousands of years. And there has been a recent flux of imitators and rehashers trying to pass off work similar to ours, or even with similar cover styles and titles, so forth. So I mention this specifically because I've recently received some correspondence from some disappointed people who have purchased someone else's Anunnaki Bible, thinking it was mine. So, so my name's Joshua Free. If I'm not officially connected to the project, such as you might see listed on Mardukite.com or Necronomicon.com, then obviously someone else is producing it. So one of the most interesting, or perhaps the most asked about aspects of the ancient tradition, particularly in Babylon, Mesopotamia is a very wide-spanning area with a long history, diverse cultures and languages, even in of itself. So when we're talking about the Mardukite tradition, the Necronomicon, Anunnaki Bible, the Babylonian system, we're speaking specifically of a system that emerged within Sumerian Civilization and then later became the dominant empire for Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East. So in Babylon we have what is called, within the Necronomicon paradigm, the Ladder of Lights. And people question the validity of the concept of Ladder of Lights. Is the same tradition and lore that some know from the Simon work, and we discuss in the Tablet B series of our Necronomicon Anunnaki Bible. It's called the Babili. It's two words, Bab-Ili, Bab-Ilu. That's where the term Babylon comes from. And while Ladder of Lights is one semantic for this, ladder and lights, the reason being that the words to describe Babylon can also be applied for stairway, gateway, ladder, and so forth. And then as far as lights, the other word applies to gods, heaven, and stars. So what we have is Ladder of Lights, stairway to heaven, stargate, gateway to the stars, so on and so forth. Those are basic semantics, basic concepts that can be interpreted, however, in that way. And what it is it's like a origin to the more familiar Semitic Kabbalah, Kabbalistic system. So we have the primary seven, the seven Stargates, Babylon, the seven of the younger generation of Anunnaki that are observed in the primary pantheon of Babylon, representing the planets of the local system, the seven that are most visible, the seven ancient planets. For example, Nana Sin, representing the moon current, and Nabu is Mercury, Inanna Ishtar is Venus, Shamash, or Utu, is the sun, Nergal being Mars, also the gatekeeper for being the consort of Ereshkigal, which is the queen of the underworld. And then Marduk, of course, representing Jupiter, current for Babylon, replacing Enlil in the old Sumerian system. And then Ninib, or Ninurta, for Saturn. So that would be the 7. And then, of course, the supernal trinity, Anu, Enlil, and Enki, representing the more distant forces that weren't necessarily as visible to the planet. So, of course, the supernal trinity plus the 7 gives you 10, 10 corresponding with the traditional Semitic Hebrew Kabbalah. What we are being given then in this ancient systemology, methodology, is the most fundamental or archetypal version of this. Is this the only way in which these can be relayed or understood? Is it the only tradition that exists out there? Well, of course not. But it is the most ancient. It is the most paramount, the most raw of all the energy currents and their way of being able to be understood, the way they've been personified, the way they've been later reinterpreted, diluted, and watered down into later traditions and cultures throughout history and geography around the planet. So what we are given is a cosmology, is an ancient way, a paradigm, way of viewing the world, seeing systems, and the way that the cosmos are formed. It has both macrocosmic and microcosmic properties. So in ancient Babylon, Mesopotamia, we have the formation of ziggurats with 7 stages, 7 gates, 7 occurring in all the ancient methods of breaking down the system, whether it be colors, the planets, notes of music, and so forth. And then, of course, the 3 more supernal ones. These are then interpreted both macrocosmically, again, with the ziggurats and gateways and the planets, and then, of course, microcosmically with how they apply to the human form, to the spirit, and so forth. So, in essence, we have a direct correlation between the multiple layers that are perceived or often interpreted as colored bands connected to the chakras, which one-to-one, these bands connect us or bind us to these systematic gate existences or polarities or currents in the physical universe. So at the center of our being, there's a divine spark of the source, which is eternal, the core of all the vibration, and then by entering into a higher state of consciousness to activate these gates, they have both inward and outward reflections. Outwardly, they may have very well been used in ancient times to materially transport between temples or have other technological and cosmic expressions throughout the universe. Inwardly, they reflect to a lot of meditative, spiritual light work and ways of increasing conscious awareness, mystical abilities, and a true understanding of our experience and our means of our experience, our time spent in an energetic relationship exchange with our environment, and mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, based on what we know, based on what we subject ourselves to. And so in the quote-unquote Necronomicon tradition, or ancient Mesopotamian Babylonian system, the Mardukite system, this way of working with the Stargates on a personal, spiritual, or mystical level is sometimes known as gatekeeping or gatewalking. But we rarely use that term so as not to confuse with what the more primitive, bastardized form found in the Simon Necronomicon, people using that as their basis of understanding, are not getting the whole story. And so we encourage people that have discovered that or worked with that, found that speaks to them personally, to explore, for example, our own more complete, the Necronomicon, the Anunnaki Bible, and our other works that are related to this study. So, Necronomicon, the Anunnaki Bible. Within this book is essentially the most ancient writings on the planet. The formation of the systems through the written word. It is often actually said history begins in Sumer. Human history, begins with writing. So what we're dealing with, and this is an important part of the esoteric path when you're dealing with especially this more inaccessible aspect of human civilization, the inception of systems, okay? So history begins with writing, okay? That's the whole definition of history, is the idea of the written word being used to actually relay what is happening. So academically, everything that we consider prior to the inception of writing is prehistoric. So that means prehistory extends maybe, almost 6,000 years at best, which is not an exceptionally long time. Language itself is different. Language is a predetermined set of communicative words, sounds, expressions, gestures that can be used to relay an intentional meaning from one source to another. Language is very different than writing. Okay, without even the use of writing, a spoken language can establish shared meanings about many things found in one's environment, and probably many thoughts and feelings that could be expressed just through non-written language. So language is just a means of communicating data or a personal experience that is shared with a shared understanding between sender and receiver. So given the discovery of the cuneiform tablets, however, cuneiform tablets are the oldest writings. And when we mean writings, okay, we're talking the written word as opposed to pictures. We have many ancient, what they call pictographic examples of communication, but that is a lot different than the cuneiform writing system. We found in tablets, clay coins, other artifacts that can all be used as a benchmark for language that seems to have reached the Sumerians around 3500-ish BC. And it's during this proto-literate period that one can definitively find these representations of a Sumerian oral language being solidified as proto-text in the forms of like pictures and symbols, even predating Egyptian hieroglyphs. And this is what they call pictographic writing. Now, pictographic writing kind of has meaning almost in any language to some extent. There's a difference between, again, the spoken language and like word sounds, speech, in comparison to how it's written down. The original version of Sumerian writing used literal representative pictures to represent basic objects and ideas. That's different than writing out an abstract word to represent the same. The pictographs weren't dependent on a particular verbal language, so a picture of a bird meant bird regardless of what an individual's language, like a vocal language, would be used to communicate a sound to mean bird. Whereas these pictograms were kind of based on what things appeared to be, rather than what a word would be to define it. And this is not just like an abstract concept. This is we can see this literally, for example, in the cuneiform sign to that means ox. In the very beginning, the like pre-cuneiform depiction or pictograph of an ox looked like the head of an ox, and then slowly, as language, the writing system developed, hash marks that kind of resembled what the original symbol looked like would be used in its stead. And this began to replace the idea of what things were with the words that could be used to describe them, or labels that could be used to define them. So, I mean, to the extent, though, that humans are concerned, the oldest writings of human civilization date to approximately 3200 BC. And it's really at this time that written language extends past very simple and literal pictographs into more abstract symbols. And they're called ideograms, ideographic. They're not quite the style of cuneiform that's very common today, the type of script common today. And one of the reasons being is that the stylus was not yet established, which is something that the Mardukite Babylonian, the god Nabu, gave the stylus as a means of standardizing tablet writing. Prior to that, your thumb, your nails, and so forth, sticks poking, and scraping hash marks and different things to form early Sumerian writing, most of which was really for the purpose of accounting. A lot of the religious, traditional systematized type writing, other than just strictly physical receipts and like monetary accounting or goods stores, heads of cattle, and so forth. A lot of that really develops later with the Babylonian systematization of Mesopotamia with the Mardukite system. For example, the Enuma Elish, or Epic of Creation, being used to elevate Marduk and so forth. So the evolution of writing, the evolution of the systems went hand in hand as a way of basically shaping and controlling the world systems and the way they were perceived and experienced by the population.